Greetings. This is the fourth installment in the series Cards in the My Religion is True game. Today, we'll look at the confusion card. As with the status card, the confusion card is less about settling the argument and more about coming out on top after the argument's over, even if that means you didn't technically win. Instead of posturing and bluster and bullying like with the status card, the confusion card uses the finest linguistic sleight of hand an apologist can dream up. This is also sometimes referred to as the Red Herring Fallacy, named after the stinkiest fish in the sea, and has come to be associated with any strategy used in a debate to distract the opponent from the topic, like the smell of red herring would distract the hunting dogs from the fox. Distraction delays losing and might even make the audience forget that the apologist was spanked for the whole world to see. These are not the droids you're looking for. I have gathered a number of examples for this video, so you will know the confusion card and the red herring fallacy when you see them. To begin, I must explain how religion deliberately distorts language and meaning. To make you obedient and suggestible, religion must keep you out of your frontal lobe, the part of the brain capable of higher reasoning. It can't function there because that part of you thinks too clearly and asks too many questions. Religion knows how to stay out of those lobes and in the dumber parts. It's been sculpted and tweaked that way over the centuries by people who know how to manipulate others. At its core, religion is brain programming. It does this all on its own without us being consciously aware of it. So even if the people who designed it are long dead, it still works as intended. It's been gradually shaped that way over time. So there isn't a single evil genius behind it. Only centuries of clever salesman types who knew what it took to coerce another person. Their work remains built into religion in the way doctrine and proselytizing function. We pass it on to other people because we think it's what God wants us to do. That's why it's been so successful for so long. Religion is built entirely on fear of damnation and comforting reassurances of being saved from that damnation. This keeps you operating in a more primitive lobe of your brain, your limbic system. As long as your thoughts are on a treadmill of fear and reassurances, you will be unable to ask questions and think critically about what got you there in the first place. By locking you up in your limbic system, religion keeps you out of your temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes, where you can tell the difference between truth and horseshit. Part of that relies on incomprehensible language designed to mystify your powers of reason. The metaphors are whimsical, poetic. They draw on images we recognize in the natural world, like the heavens, nature, and farming, but are primarily used to shape something imagined that feels as if it's just beyond our cognitive grasp. In reality, it's just a statement that doesn't make any sense. To describe the dichotomy of good and evil, the Devout talk about heaven and hell and light and darkness. They talk about paths and roads and valleys. They talk about lambs, sheep, and shepherds, fathers and sons, gardens, fields, seeds, trees, vines, and branches. They talk about the spirit, soul, and mind, all theoretical things that in the languages of Homo sapiens are subject to interpretation, which serves religion's purpose just fine. The more ambiguous and incomprehensible, the better. The Devout talk a lot about blood. Blood can be a symbol of obedience to God, as in Judaism, when the Jews smeared it on their doorframes to signal the angel of death of their loyalty, that he should skip that house and instead slaughter the firstborn in the next house. Blood can be the source of spiritual consciousness, a kind of stand-in for the soul, as believed by Jehovah's Witnesses. Blood can be a kind of soap that washes the soul clean of impurity and sin, as it is in Christianity, which claims that after a few words of Latin from a priest, wine is transubstantiated into the literal blood of Jesus. And like good little vampire cannibals, we drink it to have our souls washed clean of jealousies, lusts, and rages. They talk about the heart, but not the literal internal organ. When they say heart, they mean the seat of your emotions, the place where you decide what's most important to you. Because in the Bronze Age, people didn't know yet that thinking took place in the brain. Nowadays, the first time most believers hear the metaphor of the heart is when someone asks if they've invited Jesus into it. The average child who hears this question has a very pliable imagination and will easily accept that a magical invisible man can enter a heart and live there. A child also accepts that he can simultaneously live in other hearts because the kid next to him also recited the prayer. Forever after, that child is primed to accept more mystifying concepts, and as time goes on, will question the practical life application less. And after he does this his entire childhood, it's very difficult to undo in adulthood. An example of how language in religion is used to vaguely imply behavior is the popular 2005 Carrie Underwood song, Jesus Take the Wheel. You may have heard this metaphor used in evangelical circles. Having a car requires attention and focus, the coordination of body parts to operate a dangerous machine. This makes it a useful metaphor for daily life, something that requires us to be on the ball and make the right choices to safely reach a destination. A good Christian, therefore, will surrender the task entirely to Jesus. Of course, Jesus doesn't literally operate the vehicle for you or make all your decisions before you have to spend any energy considering them. The metaphor means to suggest that you will make every life choice, no matter how trivial, considering only what Jesus would have you do. Even those who cherry pick from religion, the pop psychologists, the talk show hosts, the life gurus, have taken cues from this distorting of meaning. Everything happens for a reason. It's all part of God's divine plan. It always works itself out in the end. All things, the sky, the universe, stars, the plants and animals, are connected. We're all broken. That's how the light gets in. Fluency in this reality-obscuring language is a requirement of acceptance in religious groups. The metaphors make no logical sense, so they're less about explaining faith in God than they are about testing your loyalty. They aren't meant to be understood. They're a test of how much nonsense you can stand without complaining or asking questions. Eventually, you might understand the intent, if not the metaphor, so your loyalty is validated. When it comes down to it, you didn't want clarity as much as validation anyway, so you leave it at that. Now, your brain has been primed to assimilate a nonsensical metaphor about letting an invisible being drive your car. You've learned that everything happens for a reason, so the fact that your child died of leukemia must have had some higher purpose. You've learned that all things are connected, so surely the stars, the trees, and the mushrooms in the forest somehow have your back and won't let you down. From now on, the more phantasmagorical nonsense you feed your brain, the more it will accept without asking questions. As long as information is packaged in this reassuring flim-flam, you let it bypass your powers of reason. If you've been speaking this God-splaining dialect all your life, you'll forever expect information of value to be packaged in it. Your parents and clergy probably taught you never to trust science textbooks or the astrophysicists on television, so you've never actually heard a cohesive argument backed by evidence. You might not even know what they sound like. That's one of the reasons religious people sometimes dither longer about life decisions. What should I do? This or that? What does God want me to do? I just don't know. I'll ask God for guidance. What should I do, God? God? The confusion card is about smoke screening a debate. Apologists will bring in all sorts of controversial topics to do it, like gender theory and bodily autonomy and young earth geology. These topics are rife with minutiae they can hyper-focus on, which effectively diverts the debate from the real questions. This doesn't win the argument, but it does prolong it, which might give the apologist time to make their opponent forget what they're talking about in the first place. They also try to play on your fear of eternal damnation, especially if you used to be a believer. They're trying to get you back on that mental treadmill of terror and reassurances. What if you're wrong? Oh no, what if I am wrong? Will I go to hell for eternity? What must I do to be saved? Relax, dude, it's just the confusion card. They'll show you things like the bacterial flagellum, for which the evolutionary process becomes difficult for the average person to imagine on the spot, claiming that this proves the universe has been intelligently designed. They'll ask what existed before the universe. When you can't answer, They insist that this means it must have been God. Swish. Meanwhile, the questions the apologists never seem to ask are the only ones that truly make sense to ask, such as, did God know that once he created Homo sapiens, the creature would be capable of doing things he found objectionable? And if this was a terrible thing, why did God go ahead with it? Sin seems like something he should have seen coming. If God is all powerful, couldn't he have negotiated a better deal than sacrificing his own son to atone for that sin? Why do I have to believe it for this deal to take effect? Shouldn't it take effect regardless of what I think? And why does he need to negotiate or make human sacrifices at all? Isn't he in charge? Who's he negotiating with on this deal anyway? The answer they give for this is that God does things we can't understand. That's the blanket confusion card at its best. Couldn't have put it better myself. And while we're on the subject, Jesus died, but he rose again within 3 days, then ascended a few weeks later. Doesn't that mean God only sacrificed his son for 3 days? I know more than a few dads who wouldn't mind sending their son to boot camp, knowing that the 10-mile runs and the abuse from the drill sergeant will be torturous. He'll be back, right? Builds character. Millions of people since the dawn of time have endured torture for much longer than a few hours, so I don't really get why what Jesus did is such a big deal. The truth is, the devout person's conscious mind has been asking these very reasonable questions all along, depending on the religious conditioning process this person underwent. Any questions that can't be answered using the flim-flam, they've been taught to wave away as quickly as possible. They threaten the smooth operation of the fear reassurance cycle that's been running inside that brain since childhood, which is what's keeping religion in control in there. Most brains, when a form of reassurance is suddenly in danger of being taken away, will slam on the brakes. The next card in the series, Cards in the My Religion is True game, is the concession card. Thank you for joining.